Welcome to Happy Times and Places, a positively inclined Doctor Who episode commentary podcast in which I, Toby Haydock, watch a Doctor Who story chosen by a friend of mine and see if I can guess what their favourite things about each instalment might be.
Hello, I'm Jack Lewis Evans. I'm a comedian, podcaster and an appreciator of Doctor Who. The story I'm nominating for Toby is Chris Eccleston banger, The Unquiet Dead. It's got ghosts, it's got zombies, and it's got Charles Dickens. Actually, he is in it. I love it.
Well, hello everyone. I wasn't expecting to do this. I'd got another New Who lined up, a two-parter, that I just didn't fancy doing this afternoon. And so I went, well, what else can I do instead? And this one loomed. And Jack Evans, I hadn't realised had been a Doctor Who fan. And I can't remember what led me to believe that he was. I think maybe we were chatting at a gig, or maybe he'd posted something on Facebook. But anyway, I dropped him a line and he snapped up one of the remaining Series 1. That was the only Series 1 then. We got a Season 1, a Series 1, and then I don't know what this one is. Is it Series 1 again? It's a very confusing way of doing it, especially if you then, unlike this Series 1, if you then load it with loads of references to what's happened previously. But anyway, that's a conversation for another day. Maybe that's why I'm doing it, because we're in the aftermath of the second epoch, the second era, the second age of Russell T Davies, and it's obviously currently that the show is I think having a rough time of it in some of the discourse that I see, and it certainly seems to have divided fandom a bit. And I wasn't really massively on the internet when this series was on. I think I used to go on Gallifrey Base, and I think I used to read Jason Arnopp's very welcome spoiler-free reviews of each episode. I think obviously Jason was working for SFX, so got advanced screenings, and I remember, because one would just kill time. Doctor Who was back. I mean, this is only the third week of it being back. And Doctor Who would kill you would kill time, and I spent far too much of my children's formative years or young years, when I should have been enjoying those, looking forward to the following episode of Doctor Who, and killing time on the internet. And I did so partially by going on Gallifrey Base, spending far too much time worrying what other people were saying. But actually, But there wasn't much known. I certainly wasn't particularly spoilered. I can't remember. Anyway, I certainly was very attracted to the spoiler-free previews that Jason Arnopp did. But other than that, and obviously got Doctor Who magazine and read it from cover to cover, it was a really exciting time to be alive. And as I say, only 3 weeks in. So maybe that's why I'm drawn to come back to this season, which, as I said, was the last to be snapped up, but some of those that have been snapped up have not yet been recorded by the people who snapped them up, and one of them, Boomtown, has, but it's Steve O'Brien who's already been on a Happy Times and Places, so I'll leave a bigger gap between Steve's previous appearance, in which he celebrated Black Orchid, to his next one, Boomtown, because I try and mix it up. And there we go. So we have Jack, who's a relatively late recruit. I dread to think when he sent me his contribution, it was probably at the dawn of time. But anyway, he's still a later recruit than some of the people who, are probably now fossils, or the last remnant of them on this planet Earth is their contribution to Happy Times and Places, waiting to be unleashed. So I haven't seen this for a long time. I mean, there was a time when I watched it over and over and over again. And this was the one that I think of the first three. I think we had the first three as a batch, didn't we? We knew the first, Rose was going to launch the show in the present day, and then End of the World was in the far-flung future, and then Unquiet Dead in the past, and the first of what we now sort of loosely know as the celebrity historical. A very, very canny way of putting the show together and packaging it and telling people, what this program does. And this is the first non-Russell T Davies written episode because it is written by. It seemed like it was an inevitability, so it was a happy confirmation that Mark Gatiss, star of the League of Gentlemen, writer of popular Doctor Who novels like Nightshade, but a genuine TV force under his own steam and due to his own achievements, would write this episode. Maybe talk about Mark during this because I've since got to know him a little bit. And let's see what we make of his first episode. Loved it at the time. I think it has been slightly... I remember at the time, I think everyone said, oh, that's the best one yet. I think it's been slightly reappraised since. No, I think it felt at the time like an absolute classic, and I think now people sort of generally like it. Some people don't, but I think people, but for me, it's got all the ingredients I like in Doctor Who. Although certain aspects of the show, as it was to be now, became apparent perhaps during this episode, because when we'd got the 3 under our belt, we sort of sat back and we kind of began to things began to take shape, patterns began to form and take shape, and we started to see what was happening. But what a time to be alive. I'm sure some of you listening to this, do young people listen to this? I don't think I appeal to young people, but if you were too young to remember this going out the first time, well, welcome, and I'm glad you listened to your elders and your betters. No, not really. I don't think young people listen to this because I suspect I'm probably an irrelevance to them. But if there are any, I'm very grateful because I think I benefit from exposure to young people. It means you become you remain aware of what is relevant, and that some of the things that you hold to be very important might actually not that might not be so. I think it's always worth keeping connected with young people, even though some of the things young people say are daft and they'll learn as they get older. Sorry, young people, but it's true. But also it's a two-way street. It is a mutually beneficial conjoining if old and young occasionally get together and exchange ideas without getting wound up with each other, without the young getting annoyed with the old for being stuffy, and without the old being annoyed with the young because they use words incorrectly and have quite annoying speech patterns, actually. Why am I talking about? Well, I suppose, is this about the young and the old? No, it's not really. It's about Charles Dickens and ghosts. So shut up, Toby, and watch Doctor Who. Well, we will do that now as we line up. And who'd have even thought you could do this even then? Line up the BBC iPlayer to watch episode 3 of one of the Doctor Who series ones, The Unquiet Dead. I'm going to press play in 3, 2, 1. And of course I pressed play in 3, 2, 1, and I was going to start by eulogising the iPlayer and going, and who'd have believed in those days that we could now fire up an episode and it play without any trouble. And I've just spent the past 15 minutes shutting down iPlayer, restarting my computer, because every time I started watching it, there was something slightly askew with the sound. It was playing slightly slowly, and so gradually went out of sync. Anyway, let's hope that this is okay as I take you back in time to this opening scene of The Unquiet Dead, which is very Welsh. All of the actors here, including Jennifer Hill playing the corpse, who has no dialogue in the episode, but Jennifer Hill was a Welsh actress. She'd done Mine or Mine, Russell T Davies's sort of pre-Doctor Who sort of flop, which I recall the first episode ending with John Scott Martin making an appearance. It just felt like Doctor Who was suddenly really in the air. But Jennifer Hill died last year. She kills here a young actor called Hugh Rees, still around doing stuff. I guess he must be based in Wales. But this was... Now, it's interesting, isn't it, that choice by the excellent Alan David, who I'm sure I'll talk about a lot, of that sort of he's not acting, oh my God, it's a horror film, the dead are rising. He's reacting as, oh, another corpse, which is, of course, glorious Mark Gatiss styled humour. But it does, if that had happened in season 17, we'd be going, they're adding they're being a bit, they're poking fun at the genre, as it were. But it's a great opening. It has it all, doesn't it? It's quite funny. It's spooky. That's horrifying, with Jennifer Hill staring straight at the camera. It's a lovely. Those are the cliffhangers, aren't they? We talked about this at the time. Well, we don't get the cliffhangers anymore. We get the pre-titles instead. And of course, it's a story set in the past, so it has this beautiful, period feel, which is perfect for Mark Gatiss. I think he's at home writing period or pastiche period, if you like. And again, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It ups the Dickensian, doesn't it? Or and I think any Doctor Who, should when it's doing the past. Robert Holmes did it all the time. He did a sort of literary version of the past that he was set in, if you like. It was Conan Doyle rather than Encyclopedia Britannica. It was Fu Manchu rather than what you might have read in the history books. And they're blatant, aren't they? Oh, Eros Lynn. So this is Welsh, yes. This is very, very Welsh. Alan David, Hugh Reese, who gets killed straight away. It's funny because we had, we'd get the cast lists given to us. They'd mention every actor, and you had no idea whether Hugh Reese, so you don't get much Welsher name that, would be the sort of young dashing hero, because there was a chance, a good-looking young local actor might be, or whether he would be, as he was here, killed before the opening titles. I remember Eve Miles being touted as somebody that was a star of the future, and of course her future stardom is kind of all tied in with Doctor Who. I'm sure she would have done brilliantly anyway, but this then led to Torchwood, and she does so much now, and has carved herself a brilliant career, and has a very much her own style as an actress that really works on television. I don't know her at all. Remember Russell asking if I knew her when I interviewed him for Who's Round, and me being very flattered that he'd think I might have come across a modern day young actress in my work as an actor, but I hadn't. He said, "Oh, she's lovely." He said, "She's really nice." So glad that she's doing well. But look, Doctor Who does all this brilliantly. But I believe the gas is, isn't it? The gas is that in order to film Dickensian Cardiff, they had to actually film in Swansea, because Swansea has got more of the feel of the period that they were after. But the reason I allude to all those Welsh actors is because I think this first season very much makes use of local on-screen talent in a way that capitalises upon the fact that it's a major BBC production being done outside of London. And quite right too. It's practical. It saves money on having to put actors up in hotels. And also, why not use the local talent that's there? Although I think Alan David, although he's Welsh, lives in London. But, but I mean, the chances are you'd cast Alan David in that part anyway, wherever you were filming, because Alan David is superb. He is actually called Alan Davis. But anyway, let's not get into that. So, it's really weird watching these two as sort of young, fledgling time travellers, whereas now, nearly 20 years later, we know that this show was a massive, massive success. And it was partly because of the ingenuity of the way that it was packaged. We had the present day with Rose, the future with the end of the world, and this, which I think at the time was the one that everyone said, "Oh, this is the best one yet." And I certainly think it was my favourite of the three. I always consider the first three as a sort of package, because they're deliberately designed to tick different boxes. Now, this is a very Doctor Who thing, isn't it? Having something like Second Sight, taking advantage of that, which is something I shrink from slightly. I prefer something scientific, but of course Doctor Who cleverly does, and somebody who's fluent in Doctor Who like Mark Gatiss goes, well, no, I'll have Second Sight, but I'll give a sort of semi kind of scientific explanation for it. There's a reason that she has this. It's not just that clairvoyance is a sort of thing that some people have. It's because it's tied in with the whole of the story. Now here's another Welsh actor, Wayne Cater, who was I believe around this time, or not long after this time, he's only playing a small part in this, but it's a nice part. I'm not. I'll talk about Simon Callow elsewhere. Of course, he's in it all the way through. But Wayne Cater, I think, played a Welsh language Hamlet. I think he's rather a well-known Welsh actor. So, but of course, what you can do when you're doing it, because Welsh actors don't get often, I suspect, the chance to play in sort of widely distributed all over the BBC dramas. It has the kind of pick of them in this first series. And it's not just this story. If you look at Father's Day, a lot of the actors there are Welsh but playing Cockney. But I think there's less obvious use of locally based talent in subsequent seasons. Now, I don't know if that's because they used up a lot of them. I'm sure there are far more actors based in Wales who haven't had a look in. But of course, Doctor Who then got more popular, probably was able to afford to bring actors down, etc. Whatever. I do like the fact that this first season, very much has the use of local resources, including actors, as part of its makeup, which makes it distinct, I think, from later seasons. And here is, who else would you cast as Charles Dickens? Of course you would cast Simon Callow. I remember seeing on teletext. That was a thing. I used to check teletext every day, probably several times a day. I probably would check teletext as often as I today check Facebook or Twitter or whatever. But with that, you had to wait for the stories to go around. Teletext for the young was like a sort of postcard version of Twitter. It had it'd go on the showbiz pages, and there would be sort of 8 or 9 stories, and you could click on them, but if the story was sort of 3 pages long, you had to sort of wait for page 1 to turn to page 2 to turn to page 3, and sometimes you click on it and it would be page 3 and you'd have to wait for page 1 to come, and did you read the last page first, or did you old world problems, as they say. And it announced, that's where I found out Simon Callow was playing Charles Dickens in Doctor Who, and I think it was quite late at night. And then maybe I'd got back from a gig, but I had a glass of wine, and it just felt that, this series of Doctor Who is going to be something special, because Callow was the sort of caliber of actor. I'd actually mooted him as a doctor. That's a great shot of the dead woman in the audience. And this snow stuff is all done brilliantly. It's a great Doctor Who Christmas episode. We'll come to that, I'm sure. Not at Christmas, but the idea of a Doctor Who Christmas episode had not entered my head at this point. We was just hoping people would watch and like Doctor Who, but Callow as Dickens, I mean, that was obvious because he did a one-man show as Dickens. But to be in Doctor Who, as I say, I'd mentioned to some people that he would be, when Doctor Who was classic Who, he'd have been somebody that I would have liked to have seen play Doctor Who. I remember an actor I told that going, absolutely not, and found Simon Callow to be the sort of worst sort of mannered actor that he didn't like. I think Simon Callow is great. He is quite theatrical, but that lends itself to certain sorts of parts, and I love this style of acting. I wouldn't cast him in Top Boy, but he's perfect for this, and of course he has the association with Dickens. So it was a great advocacy of the script that Callow had agreed to play Dickens, about whom he knows so much. It was a great notch on Doctor Who's, early bedpost. That an actor of his quality was signing up to appear in the show. So it suddenly was, okay, this show's attracting good actors that will get headlines. Those headlines will give it clout within the industry, and so the casting of Callow as Dickens was a huge boon. I thought it sent out, this is a serious prospect. What phantasmagoria is this? Phantasmagoria is, of course, I think I've just mispronounced it twice. You could tell we're live. Is the name of Phantasmagoria is a Mark Gatiss a Big Finish. So he's quoting the name of his own Big Finish, but it is also a lovely period piece of phraseology that helps to place us where we are, and all of this stuff is great. It looks like ghosts, so it's making with the second sight with the ghosts. It's saying, oh, are you sure? Are you sure this is doing what Doctor Who does? Because Doctor Who is really science fiction, and here we have ghosts and mind reading, and of course what Gatiss does so well is he gives us a as I say, a scientific explanation for all of it. You look more like a Navi. But yes, my favourite kind of interesting, because I think I would say, the stories that I came away from approving of the most once this season was over were this one and The Empty Child, the Doctor Dances, which are both excellent period piece Doctor Who's that do a lot of things that Doctor Who does very, very well, but puts a new sort of spin on them. But actually, in subsequent years, they would possibly be the ones I've watched the least. So it leads me to, I mentioned on a recent podcast about guilty pleasures and saying, should we have any pleasures that are guilty? Is it just because we worry about what other people would think? But I would probably turn to watch The End of the World quicker than I would turn to watch this, even though I love this, the colour scheme of this and the period setting and all of that. I love the sort of zesty colour of The End of the World. But even though I probably think this is better, certainly because The End of the World has that bit where he walks through the fan by magic, which I'm not wild about. But in terms of what Russell T Davies Doctor Who is, The End of the World is perhaps more typical of the sort of zesty fun adventure. Anyway, another actor to talk about, Mike Povey. Mike Povey is the coachman. Who I didn't realise until much, much later is the same actor as Michael Povey, who was one of the policemen in Minder. So a lovely regular part, and again, a highly regarded Welsh actor, and I think a playwright too. He's sadly since passed away, and rather under the radar in terms of sort of national press and everything else like that. But he was well known on telly when I was growing up because the coppers in Minder were an important part of Minder, and here he is just doing he just does a cameo here. I mean, it was a handful of lines, and you barely see him, but it's nice that he's ended up doing a Doctor Who. He could have played a much bigger part and been of great service to the show, but it's a sign of what the acting career is like and what television is like and what Doctor Who is like, that you can get somebody marvellous, doing 3 lines and you barely see them. That's good in many ways for Doctor Who. It's also a sign of the beastliness of the profession. But anyway, what it does mean is that Michael Povey from Minder was in Doctor Who, and I didn't even notice. And I should be noticing that sort of thing. I didn't realise it was the same guy until many, many years later. But look at I think the colour scheme in this is brilliant. We very cleverly in the first scene, it almost opened with the lighting of the gas lamp, didn't it? Which is a very, very clever foreshadowing of what's going to happen within the story. So I think that's very clever. I like it when the piece when you watch something back again and you go, they were giving us sort of subtle clues. I always admire it when there's that sort of level of attention to detail. But this is perfect ingredients of Doctor Who. The Walking Dead are a great ingredient of Doctor Who, and Doctor Who in the olden days was never really allowed to do it brilliantly because you weren't allowed to have too deathly a makeup, for example. I would say nothing could look like Night of the Living Dead or whatever, and these are still quite subtle. You'd probably do them more horrifically now, but Hugh Reese and Jennifer Hill do have the sort of are slightly wizened and whitened out, and something's been done to their eyes. So I think for 2005, The Walking Dead are as scary as they could be, and certainly scarier than any prior example. Hello, Richard Briers and T.P. McKenna have been in Doctor Who. I mean, yeah, that is quite subtle now, but I remember it at the time. It was feeling, oh, Doctor Who is playing with, walking cadavers, which is always something that I think the Haemovores are kind of that, aren't they? It's the dead rising out of the sea, but because it's Doctor Who, you have to sort of make them blue and barnacled. So I think I felt that this was Doctor Who, being able to do what it perhaps not been able to do in quite this way in its original manifestation. And so it's Mark Gatiss going, oh, well, what's something I wouldn't have been able to do then, but I can do now that still fits in with what the programme is and how it does it. And this is one of those things. And I think that's why I quite like that, because I like my Doctor Who to be I like it when Doctor Who taps into horror. I think I find horror perhaps more impactful than science fiction. Although, again, the stories I choose to watch, difficult. I don't know. But yes. So anyway, we've got Charles Dickens as the Scylla, and this is good, isn't it? That we meet an historical figure so that young people watching have a little bit of an education, and obviously this has elements of A Christmas Carol in it. So not only is the character there to represent the character, there's a thematic echoing of his presence within the story that is being told as well. And here we have the first. Oh, look at that lovely! I like tea and cups and saucers. And that's your hands had a quick wonder, you dirty old man. I mean, this is certainly sort of throwing in things that you would never really have done in classic Who. There's the odd, I think Joe Bell is suggested as being a bit sleazy, but this is pretty blatant. Alan David, excellent Welsh actor. He was the Polonius. He's done loads for the RSC, loads and loads for the RSC. A proper classical theatre actor, and I was very pleased to hear that he was going to be in Doctor Who, because I remember a lovely a lady called Amy Ormond who encouraged me, and she's long dead now, bless her. Who encouraged me in theatre when I was young and working in a cafe in Ludlow. She used to come and see me in things, and she'd said she'd just seen. I remember when she'd seen Alan David play Polonius and the Gravedigger in Hamlet, to the Hamlet of Samuel West, and I think he got good. So those are the sorts of parts he plays. Those good. I think Wayne Cater was in that production as well. Those good character Shakespeare character parts for which you need a really, really good actor, and you reward them with some fantastic things to do. And of course, Mark Gatiss is the right person to write this. He is he's very much steeped in Victoriana and classic literature and all of that sort of stuff. And so he's a scholar. He loves this stuff and is well steeped in it, but also understands Doctor Who. So it was entirely predictable, but not in a dull way, that Mark, who was a big TV star at the time, and I'd devoured The League of Gentlemen and watched it over and over again. So and I'd got Nightshade, his new adventure, which owes a lot to Quatermass, gosh, how much water under the bridge. In fact, when I was doing Moths Ate My Doctor Who scarf, which wasn't too long after this, a couple of years. No, it was before I was doing Moths Ate My Doctor Who scarf. I was doing a radio play at the BBC. I think it was during this season, and Mark was there at the BBC on Oxford Road, and I walked past him, and I didn't want to do too much, and I said, "Oh, I just want to say I love The Unquiet Dead," and he said, "Oh, thank you very much. It's a classic." And I walked off, and I went to be in. Maybe I was doing Dead Souls with Michael Palin and Mark Heap. I think I was. So I was having quite a star. I was feeling good about myself as an actor, and then I walked past somebody who and it wasn't long after this. I think it was during this season. And then I saw Mark on Derby train station, and then I met him a couple of times in a very believable dream. So there's a couple of times when I woke up and felt that I actually knew Mark Gatiss, and I didn't, and I finally did meet him. Whenever I finally met him, gosh, when did I meet Mark? I can't remember, but it was obviously before. Yes, I met Mark because I asked to interview him for my Quatermass book, and I interviewed him in the Ivy, 10, 12 years ago, and then obviously subsequently I did Adventure in Space and Time, and now I've worked with him many times, and I get the odd text, which is nice. But I felt like I knew him long before I actually did, and as I say, I would see him. I saw him quite often. But I don't like to bother people, and unless it's in a work situation, in which case it's slightly different, obviously. This, I remember my friend who's a comic called Seymour Mace, who's a very funny man, but he's the personification of a sort of sad clown Seymour, in that he could be, get quite down on himself, but also be furious with things that make him cross. And I remember him being very angry with this scene of the sort of how on the nose it is about saying young ladies from the olden days are just the same as young ladies from new times. It's just that they're a bit more demure because of the rules of society. But you can see what they're doing, and I think it's absolutely fine, partially because it's beautifully played, and this could actually be very, very bad, and they do it well. I think it's well in spite of itself. But it does go on too long. I think that's fair. I mean, I think I would concede that it goes on too long, and I have to acknowledge the other shortcomings of it. But I understand why it's there. And remember, we are introducing this type of show to an audience that might be resistant to it. We're introducing it to a young audience that we want to keep, and so it may seem a little unsophisticated to those older of us. But if it's a useful tool for younger viewers, getting an identification figure and having that, really rammed home, I don't think that's too much of a problem. And again, especially when it's so delightfully played, and they're really good, these two actors or actresses. I never know. My partner is a woman and she is an actress, but she says actor, and I know other actresses who go, "You call me an actress, don't call me an actor." So I've said both, so I don't get into trouble with anybody. And of course, Eve Miles goes on to become a proper. It's quite funny when she ends up in Torchwood, and then they see her on the monitor, and Rose sees her on the monitor, and they have to go, "Do you come from an old Welsh family?" in order to explain the fact that somebody that you look like was cast in it, even though obviously she won't have had kids at her age, and she dies at the end of this, so she can't be directly related to. She can't be a descendant of Gwyneth. But it did lead to a great time in Canada when I was with Rob Shearman and some Canadian friends, and we would we had a running gag where every time we mentioned an actor who'd been in Doctor Who more than once, we'd sort of go, General Carrington, do you come from a long line of Dutch gas engineers or whatever? It could be quite funny. Oh, and here we introduce the big bad wolf, which again, seeing as we don't really know what all of this is all about, she invests this with so much. I love the way that she does that. You can see why they use her. I'm also obsessed with those swede or turnips behind Billie Piper, which are getting more screen time than a lot of actors get in Doctor Who these days. But she does that really well. I think you can see why they liked her and why they decided to use her again. But story-wise, I do feel we've been stuck in this kitchen for quite a while. But I love the beautiful sort of beige and rusty hue and the dark and slightly sort of burnt orange palette that this episode has. And the lighting is beautiful. I think all this stuff with the snow and the streets, and again the subtle thing of the gas flame blowing. We have a happy medium joke here, don't we? which I think is a joke that when you write it, you sort of go, I think I'll take the day off. There's beautiful, luminous tambourines in a squeeze box between the knees. It's beautiful. There's some wonderful dialogue that Mark clearly relishes in writing. And this, I think, period drama allows you to do, because we somehow find ourselves accepting flowery, overblown dialogue because we expect people to have spoken like that in the past. It's a sort of translation convention, which means you can have dialogue that, again, you couldn't have in Top Boy, which you wouldn't cast Simon Callow in. But you know, I like the way this story has its cake and eats it. It has all of this stuff that you associate with horror, even a séance that you with ghost stories. That's a lovely aerial shot. It's a lovely carpet too. But they have a science fiction explanation, and I think that's a great move. So what an exciting time this was to be alive. It's worth pointing out that there has been some resistance to the idea that the Gelth are apparently, the twist is that the Gelth are really nice. And so the Doctor says, you know, we got to let them through because not all aliens are bad. Here they are. Oh, and the Gelth are Zoe Thorne, who I met. It's all related to Hamlet, isn't it? Because I saw Zoe Thorne in David Tennant's Hamlet. Zoe Thorne was in David Tennant's Hamlet. Did I meet her then? I mean, because I met up with I met my friend Madeline in the audience, who knows David, but actually she had other mates in the show. I didn't see David after that, and so I went to the bar with her afterwards and met a load of the cast, including Zoe Thorne. But I don't think we had any meaningful conversation. But she was there, so that was nice. But so the Time War is being thread through as well. Because I've just done Let's Kill Hitler, and I was sort of saying, oh, well, a lot of that is, you know, having stuff. It's part of the jigsaw of the season as a whole. But this has had Bad Wolf. This has had the Time War. But I think you could have both of those things in to never be picked up again, and they would still contribute to this story. You know, the Time War is there because of the Gelth. The Big Bad Wolf, it just could be a sort of scary thing that's part of, you know, that note could be added without it feeling like something later is dependent upon it, I think. So this idea as well that monsters are benign creatures that just need our help is like the Axons. You know, we've come and offered you a gift. We've not come to invade, but actually that's a ruse, and because you have to not try to tell the same stories all the time, which, you know, aliens are visiting Earth, and it's obvious what they want to do. They want to invade it, or they're trying to invade Earth subtly through this medium or that. Well, they're trying to invade Earth, but they're a part of their modus operandum is to pose as benign creatures in need of help. Now, I've seen it read into that as aliens like foreigners. That's and as this is a really funny way of sort of explaining what aliens are in terms that these people would understand. That's really nice. That's very nicely done. And it's a nice sci-fi idea about them needing, you know, Gwyneth as a bridge, and the fact that the ghosts aren't ghosts but they're aliens that need a, you know, a housing shell, as it were, an organic shell, and this opens up a really interesting argument about how we feel, because it is about recycling because they're dead. So this turns out not to be what the story is about, and we'll talk about that, I'm sure. But the fact that this allows the Doctor to be a bit sort of Tom Bakery. You know, he's quite stern, isn't he? Sort of going, you know, I have a different morality from you, and your morality, you know, we're sort of siding with Rose in the sense that we go, no, we don't like the idea of our dead loved ones getting up and walking about. But actually, Doctor Who comes in and says, yeah, but why not? That's purely, an aesthetic and an instinctive recoil, and that in terms of what is morality and what is correct, if we assume the Gelth didn't turn out to be baddies, that would we let people or aliens who needed to use flesh that is no longer being used by the people using it, because the people's mind spirit has gone. It's only the flesh avatar, the suit, that is now lying around waiting to rot away, so why not use it? And of course we would recoil from that, but again, not for any moral reason really, because it's not desecrating your loved one, in the sense that it's making use of something that they used for a great good. Now, we get out of the moral dilemma because it turns out that the Gelth are bad, and this opens up something very interesting, because I've seen it written up that this is Mark Gatiss being anti-immigration. I know Mark relatively well now, and I can assure you he's not anti-immigration, and I suspect nor was anybody who worked on this show. But you can write a story where you go, the aliens, here's a twist, the aliens are nice and they sound like a young girl and they're slightly angelic, but the twist is they're actually bad. That's just a way of trying to make a different alien. They're not, because of that, it doesn't mean it's a comment on immigration. And I can understand how somebody might want to read it that way if they were inclined to see the worst in the people making what is obviously quite a liberally minded show. And that is where and we do this turned up to 11 these days as well. But I think sometimes a story about aliens that appear to be one thing and turn out to be another is sometimes just a story about trying to have a different kind of alien, and that's all right to do in a show like Doctor Who, where you don't just want your aliens to be generic, you want them to have a different thing so that we're intrigued to watch them and find out about them. And that's a lovely twist. There we go. And indeed you could actually say the aliens are exploiting the fact that the Doctor isn't anti-immigration and is really nice. So it's not saying all immigrants are evil aliens in disguise. It's just saying these ones are. But of course, I can see why people might want to read it of the other, but I don't think any other signals the show is giving off suggest that. And so twisting and breaking necks is pretty grim, isn't it? And I've always been struck by this cadaver here. That's pretty grim, isn't it? I think it's gone a little bit wrong. It's very funny, but yeah, who looks a bit like the bearded one who's killed Alan David looks. He reminds me a bit of Eric Campbell, the villain in the Laurel and Hardy's, or indeed Francis de Wolf, who I've recently been watching playing Vasor in The Keys of Marinus, who is a great big, bearded actor with startling eyes, and I think that alien cadaver actor is the same. Now, there was an element too, and this was commented on at the time, that the Doctor doesn't really have much to do with the denouement. Indeed, that he's, as he says, he's locked in a cellar in Cardiff. Lovely timing, nice joke, and that it is actually Dickens's actions that save the day. But Dickens has been kind of inspired and improved by his meeting with the Doctor. I'm stretching slightly because I do think there's an element of endings that I seem to recall were quite often the least satisfying aspects of some of these early RTD1s, but in the same way that my favourite era, the Hinchcliffe era, also I think sometimes struggles with endings. But yeah, the Doctor and Rose are kind of stuck in being sad with each other. she's great. I love the way she says it's not your fault, but she's still pissed off. and I love the way that he does that lovely thing of, you know, mentioning historical events, which it's always fun when the Doctor does. Sort of mentions, I was at the Boston Tea Party or whatever. And that's, you know, that's really scary, lovely Doctor Who stuff. The animated human cadavers stretching through the black metal gates of the cellar. It's all beautiful stuff, and it's lovely that Dickens gets to save the day, and it's quite right that he has an important role in the story. Go down fighting, they say, and this is important for their relationship, which becomes. Well, it has its cake and eats it, doesn't it? You've got that element of romance if you want it, but it's unconsummated. So it makes me happy that there's none of that stuff seen through to the end. No, he's worked it out. But I love the fact that he sort of defers to the Doctor, because he even though he's come up with it, the show needs to acknowledge that Dickens still sort of looks up to the Doctor, and that actually the Doctor has helped Dickens with his malaise, which is set up early in the adventure. And then we have, another sort of not quite science fiction-y thing, but one that is acceptable in Doctor Who terms again. So we had the ghosts, which are made acceptable because actually they turn out to be aliens, and there's a sort of science there. And here we have, character doing something after death almost. There are more things in heaven and earth that are dreamt on in your philosophy, blah, blah, blah. But she does it because of a vestige of humanity. And that's another area where I think Doctor Who is allowed to slightly ride roughshod over logic in its conclusions or whatever, because it is a spark, literally here, a spark of humanity that enables the aliens to be defeated and the Doctor to escape. And I think it's very touching that she's already dead. And his response to that is very beautiful, and that to me is extremely Doctor Who-y. She's dead, but there's something about the powerful nature of humanity at its best, which I think, when we talk about the show trying to have a message and trying to appeal to the best in us. It's things like this, and then the show has a rich history of, self-sacrifice. But this takes it to a slightly more metaphysical level. It's not just somebody staying behind to save the day. It's somebody who's already dead, whose humanity has resided just enough to do the brave act. So yeah, I think that really works, and it actually brings a lump to my throat. I think that's a really powerful moment, and it's the script is acknowledging that couldn't really have happened, but saying, but it's more important to us that these more things in heaven and earth that are dreamt of in our philosophy do happen. That's why we're doing science fiction. That's why we can celebrate the human spirit in a way beyond the realms of what's possible to show in naturalistic drama. And I think that absolutely works. And I think that's a really powerful moment that I wasn't expecting to be a highlight for me when I came to watch this again this time round. I knew that it happened and remembered it that happened, but I hadn't expected that to be the thing that was perhaps the most powerful to me. But it definitely is. So well done, everybody. And I love that this ends on a revivified Charles Dickens who behaves like the subject of one of his most famous tales. And in fact, you would now probably, would you have this as a Christmas one? I suppose you'd probably need a couple of chases somewhere and a couple of big comedy moments, but thematically, this is a beautiful Doctor Who Christmas special, which again very cleverly works works in everything to do with the celebrity guest. And of course this then led to many other historicals where we encountered a famous person, and that works in a number of ways because it means you get good actors to play the famous person. It works for the kids who will perhaps be inspired to find out more about that person. Again, it's a winner in every regard. So it's tentative steps, as I say. I think there are moments where this zestiest of Doctor Who seasons and indeed regimes, RTD Doctor Who tends to hit the ground running and fly by the seat of its pants, which sometimes excuses its compromised endings. But this one has a slightly more languid pace. But just I by the way, I have to acknowledge I quite like the bit where the Doctor's a fan in the carriage. I mean, it's I don't think it's the best performed bit of Eccleston, but I do like the idea of turning the Doctor into one of us to moan about the ending of something to the person that's made it. It's not quite how I want my Doctor to be, but I appreciate the joke at our expense, and the fact that the Doctor can be like us is nice. Down Boise, I can't imagine any Doctor prior to him having said that, and yet it works with Eccleston. That was another. And of course, we're slaves to history. That's just a very small and beautiful observation. Oh, he was so nice, yeah, but he's already, like Gwyneth in a way. When you met him, he's already dead, and that is said in history. And I find that, when I listen to recordings now and see that people are so alive and then they're gone. And obviously this isn't your actual Charles Dickens, but that idea that he can seem so alive and real to them. And then when they're gone, history takes its course, and he dies not long after. And it's and yet we leave seeing him alive and full of life. And so from that sad observation about the inevitability of his death, we see him more alive than we've seen him in the whole episode. And what a beautiful contrast that is. And so what a well-intentioned sort of celebration of life and humanity that story is, which is again why the more critical reading of it being anti-immigration, I think, is an ungenerous one. And this seemed very exciting because it was returning to the present day. That shot of Big Ben is so amazing, isn't it? But actually, Jason Arnott's spoiler preview of this said it was the first one that had been slightly underwhelming. And I remember when Aliens of London World War III was the one it was okay not to like quite as much, because that, even more than this, shows itself being, the first uncertain steps into a new landscape. Obviously, a landscape using some of the landmarks and layouts of landscapes of years gone by, but so any of its minor shortcomings is the wrong word, but hiccups I can kind of forgive, and I can forgive anything where the credits go so slowly you can read what everybody does. When we had respect for the art and the artists, and just that the audience could handle reading stuff for a bit without stuff being. I say this every time. I'm sorry, I'm like a broken record. But the thing about a broken record is you can at least hear what it's saying. Anyway, listen, because it says it over and over again. I've got to choose 5 things about The Unquiet Dead. I rather enjoyed that. I hadn't been expecting to watch that, as I say. I just sort of plucked it. What did I enjoy about The Unquiet Dead? Well, the thing that hit me the most was that lovely, and I would not always okay moments like this in Doctor Who, but I think it's thematically apposite. I think it's thematically tied in with the story that is being told about the dead woman retains her humanity, where all the other dead bodies become avatars for the invading species. this shows that even after death, and so it buys in with that philosophy, that conundrum as well, that there's something special. If we want to celebrate now, I'm an atheist. I think probably once we die, that's it. But I like to romanticize the idea that there is some spark within us that does make us special, that accounts for, or at least helps us appreciate those moments that are beyond the earthly or beyond just everyday interaction. The things that make people magical and special, and moments and friendships and all those sorts of things. More than just, what the animals do. And so this idea that whatever humanity is can remain after death in order that Gwyneth can do a brave thing. That wonderful. I love a self-sacrifice in Doctor Who. They always make me cry anyway when mortally wounded people say, "Get out! I'll hold them off." That's how I want to go. I'm sure I've said it before on a podcast like this. So, if you want me, if you want to see me at my finest, be on a spaceship with me that's crashing down to Earth and mortally wound me, and I will stay off and I will make sure the spaceship instead crashes into the alien spaceship and we all survive, and I'll get a final brave close-up, and perhaps I will know that I was right. But yeah, so Gwyneth retaining her humanity even after death, because it ties in with the themes of the episode. It's actually a beautifully gut-wrenching moment when the Doctor has his moment with her, and then when he explains it to Dickens and Rose afterwards. I think it's really beautiful and very moving, and it caught me both times. So that was my big one. That was my biggie. I did also like the moral dilemma. I think that conundrum posited that makes us examine our sensibilities about, would you allow aliens to use our dead bodies that we don't actually need, if it was to do a benevolent thing? I think that's a great way of highlighting the Doctor's alien quality, whilst also wanting him to bond with Dickens and Rose. He's quite dismissive of both of them at various points in the episode, and sometimes it's to do with sensibilities. And I think that's a very clever way of illustrating that aspect of the show this early on in its resurrection. You have to have Charles Dickens as played by Simon Callow. It's a wonderful performance for more reasons than just that it's a good actor in Doctor Who giving a good performance. It's because of what Dickens represents with Callow, what Callow represents that early on in the show's resurrection as a actor of real heft and respect, lending himself to the show and the show benefiting as a result. But the fact that if you wanted anyone at that point to play Charles Dickens on television, you would ask Simon Callow, and the fact that Doctor Who asked and got him meant so much even before that episode was aired, and the resulting performance was no disappointment. I also like the sort of aspects of horror. I think Mark Gatiss is very good at invoking the horrific. I like period horror, and Doctor Who does that very well. But to bring it in and bring in the magic and the ghosts and the Walking Dead, but to give them all a scientific explanation is perfect Doctor Who. It's taking all of the things that actually would sit uncomfortably in Doctor Who's sensibility as a show that is not about magic, and actually where magic is sort of seen as a cop out and leaves me a little bit cold. It actually gives them all, as Nigel Neal does, a relatively solid science fiction explanation whilst using the tropes of horror. So it's having your cake and then eating it, and then your cake actually turning out to be a really healthy thing made of things that are much better for you than cake is. So you have cake, but it's made of lettuce and lean protein. So yeah, you're having a cake, but remaining within your noom points. And the fifth and final thing that I like, because that horror sort of tied in with a lot of things, including the period setting, didn't it? And the Walking Dead. And my final favourite thing. I think maybe I'll go, because I remember it at the time so well. I'll go for the cold open, the cliffhanger, if you like, because I think it balances everything very nicely, and I think it felt. I felt that in safe hands with Mark Gatiss, because I kind of knew what to expect because of, knowing what his predilections are, and having consumed the League of Gentlemen, that the horror would be plausible, that it would sound right, that the dialogue would be bang on, that it would be slightly grotesque, but also authentic seeming to the period stuff, but also quite funny. And as I say, I'm in two minds about Sneed, sort of going, oh dear, she's one of them come along. We got another of them, but I think that treads the line just right, because it never sends it up too much. And then of course when she's out in the snow, you've got that horrifying right close up and that wonderful makeup and into the title sequences. So it sets up the period that I love so much. It has the Walking Dead in it that I love so much. It's a shock moment when the corpse comes alive, and again that feels quite sort of advanced for Doctor Who. It feels like Doctor Who's doing stuff that you really want it to be doing, especially as we hadn't seen Mark Benton killed in Rose, and there was an element of sort of, oh, is this show going to be quite squeamish? Well, that put that thought to bed, but also it is quite funny. So it's got a star writer, but it's channeling everything that he does best, and I think I felt that this was Doctor Who definitely going in the direction that I wanted it to, having had a sort of zany Douglas Adams-y fantasy the previous week with lots of funny aliens and lots of gags, and as I say, the bit with the walking through the giant propeller that I hadn't really liked, the Galaxy Quest moment with an added bit of sad God. This seemed to me to be a bit, and I love The End of the World and would happily watch it zillions of times now. I think it's great fun, but I remember being slightly disquieted about that. I thought it was saying, well, we can do anything then. I want stuff that's going to seem harder to get out of than you just do a bit. And this seemed to be on sort of safer, more traditional Doctor Who ground, if you like. And I loved all the new elements of Doctor Who, but I also wanted it to be, even though I'm not sure Doctor Who ever did a scene like this in the olden days, it kind of felt like what old Doctor Who would be doing now if it was doing it, so made me sort of comfortable. Now the show would have died if it had just been that, but I needed a bit of that, and I think the opening scene provides that. And let's see what Jack has to say. And remember, if I get 3 out of the 5, I have won. That is unlikely. It never happens. But let's see what Jack has chosen as his 5 favourite things about the Unquiet Dead.
So Toby's asked me for 5 favourite things about this story. Number 1, my first favourite thing, I love the first scene straight out of the gate. It's a perfect little teaser for the episode. This was the first episode written by Mark Gatiss, I think, and it really does have that League of Gentlemen blend of horror and comedy. It doesn't manage to lean too hard into either. It doesn't become just pure funny. It doesn't become too scary. So you just have to go full behind the couch, turn the TV off, burn your house down. You got this Undertaker guy, this character called Mr. Sneed, and this lad whose mum's passed away. Sneed goes out of the room for a bit, and this lad's mum comes alive, bursts out the coffin and starts choking him. She knocks over a vase, which has a smash sound effect, which is like this sort of Wilhelm scream of smashes. It's like, I have heard that sound effect before. And it's also quite loud in the mix, which I love it. And that's what makes Sneed runs in, not the sound of someone being choked quite loudly. And his response to seeing a corpse choking someone is oh no. He just says, oh no. Oh no. And the oh no, and the way the old lady bursts out of the coffin slapstick style is incredible. It's the closest Doctor Who comes to like the Evil Dead.
the Wilhelm scream of vase smashes. That's a beautiful description, Jack. It's funny, isn't it? Because it is funny if you want it to be that, but it's also deadly serious too. There's a lot going on tonally, and yet it kind of works. But it is It is. That's the Doctor Who always sort of flirts with being ridiculous, and I don't like it when it's too ridiculous. He says, watching a show that is almost every one of its concepts is inherently ridiculous, but I just want to be taken seriously. But of course, then the minute it's taken too seriously, there's nothing worse than po-faced Doctor Who fandom, where everything has to be taken absolutely seriously. Because Doctor Who, for God's sake, the whole point of Doctor Who and the reason that people love it is because it's all so fun. But we have to be in control. The makers have to be in control of when it's not serious, but also not have too much fun themselves, so much fun that it undermines the tale that they're telling, which is a thrilling and scary action adventure. So there's so much tonally going on with Doctor Who that you have to really, really carefully balance it. And that, I think, goes everywhere that you need to go, probably just about as far as you can, and yet it coalesces as a great opening tease that has kind of everything you need, including beautiful, Jack, the Wilhelm scream of fast smashing. I love it. And I also love the fact that it currently stands as 1-1. Oof, this is exciting. Sorry, hang on. No, 1-1. 1-0. 1-0. God, I was excited. I am winning. Jack hasn't got a point. I chose the opening. He has chosen the opening. It is 1-0 to me. 4 things to go to now ruin my record.
My second thing I love about this story, this episode, is Charles Dickens, the character of Charles Dickens in this episode. He's kind of like at the end of his career and he's depressing. Gas gives him a great line, which is like, even my imagination grows stale. I'm an old man. Perhaps I've thought everything I'll ever think, which is just a kind of great line. And he's kind of skeptical. He's really skeptical at this idea of someone who writes these fantastical stories. Well, some of his stories are very gritty and real, but he can do both. But then they see these mystical things in the real world and kind of reject it. I think that's really interesting. He sees one of these aliens, the Gelth, in full ghost mode with effects which, okay, maybe they're not the best ever watching it in 2022, but I tell you what, in the 1800s, you'd be pretty impressed with it. Yeah, I don't think you could think that was real. I don't think you think it was fake, I mean. But he sees that, still doesn't think it's real. Love it. And obviously by the end of the episode, he's changed his mind, and the Doctor's opened his mind to a million possibilities, shows him the TARDIS going off, which is fine. The Doctor's fine with doing this because he's going to die. Dickens is going to die, like, pretty soon. So it's not going to mess anything up.
Now, well, I feel a bit bad about this one because I think I also get the point for that because I chose Charles Dickens. I sort of chose Simon Callow as Charles Dickens, and it was more just emphasising that the character was there and what the casting of Callow represented. So I suppose it's up to you whether you give me the point or not. And so it might not be God bless us, everyone. It might just be God bless us, those of you that let me have the point, because Jack chose, I think, more interesting reasons. Well, I don't know. I mean, as I say, I'm always drawn to the actors and what that represents and everything like that. But I thought Jack's point was really nicely put, and that is a lovely line about maybe I know all that I'll ever know, and the fact that Dickens has his own redemption and goes through his own development, and we meet him, forlorn, and we leave him invigorated. And I think that's such a beautiful journey for that character to go on, a character who is a real person who to us is long, long dead, but Gatiss gives him that beautiful little journey towards the end of his life where he realizes the importance and the potential joy of life, and again that essential, the sort of humanity, which is what he kind of gives us in A Christmas Carol as well. So it's a deserved gift and an appropriate one. But yes, the fact that we discover him, when we first see him, he is rather sort of drawn and forlorn, and we leave inside and rather resigned to the disappointment, and we leave him outside, arms stretched wide in the snow, God blessing us all. I think is rather beautiful. So because what that could mean is that I only need one more of Jack's things, and I will win. But maybe I need 1.5. Let's see how we go. I'm not optimistic anyway, because Dickens was going to be a fairly obvious choice, wasn't it?
Third thing I like is the class politics of the episode. I love sort of class politics threaded throughout the episode. You've got the relationship between Sneed and his servant Gwyneth, and I love that it's written so he gets horribly murdered for giving her orders at the end. He's kind of an arse through the whole episode. But he doesn't just get killed. He gets killed, then possessed by one of the aliens. It's like, something more powerful than him takes control over him, controlling his body, controlling his labour. Interesting little idea going on there. Are the Gelth revolutionaries? Are they representations of revolution? Who knows? The Gelth are like obviously the villains, but I think he's kind of a villain too, and him getting got is interesting. And then even Rose, who's kind of 21st century liberated working class woman, kind of underestimates and patronises Gwyneth a bit, which I think is interesting. Like it's another element than just the sort of Sneed-Gwyneth relationship. It's the idea of the modern perception of the working class in the 1800s kind of being a bit thick, really. And then the way Gaius gives Gwyneth's character agency through her informed, chosen self-sacrifice, even though obviously it goes horribly wrong, is interesting. I think that's kind of interesting.
Now, that is the sort of contribution to Happy Times and Places that I love, because that all made absolute sense to me, but I would never have thought of it or suggested it in a million years. I'd have been banging on about what that actor was in. I love that reading, and I love the fact that Jack has gone into such thoughtful detail about it, and it proves why it's always fantastic to have different perspectives and different creative people giving their input and their reaction to a Doctor Who story. I found that really instructive. I thought that was a really good point of Jack to make. That yeah, and I was there, defending the story against a potentially racist reading of it, and Jack who. Is from working class stock, I think, and it's stuff that he talks about in his work sometimes has come through with this quite detailed analysis of why those themes perhaps resonate, and then the reflection on, as I say, that scene that I found a little bit too long between Gwyneth and Rose, but actually that serves an altogether smarter purpose as well of it underlining how we, and this is important to me in the present day, how we patronise the past. And I get very cross with people living with values that we have that are now very comfortable values to have, but that were hard fought and hard won and wrought through a process of understanding and development and all sorts of different things. When people pour scorn on people from 200 years ago for not having those ideologies at the forefront of their lives, which had altogether different challenges. So yes, the idea that we patronise people in the past for not knowing what we do, when the only reason we know what we know is because of the people that have come before us, and the fact that the human race is at this juncture in the road, and it's because we've been transported there by the people that came before us. So that speaks to me an awful lot, even though I wouldn't have thought to apply it to this. But I think that's a really astute observation about how we patronise the past and it doesn't reflect very well on us. But that also that then speaks to the issues of class that he highlighted there with Gwyneth and her relationship with Sneed and all of that. Brilliant point, Jack. I accept not getting a point for that, because it was a point. It was better than me. The point was better than me, and so I accept losing out to it. Great, love that. Thanks, Jack. That's a good one. So it's 2-1 now to me.
Fourth thing I really like about this episode is that it's set in Cardiff. I myself am Welsh, but I love how this BBC Wales show just puts the boot straight into the capital of Wales. The Doctor's explaining to Rose that he messed up and they're not in 1860 Naples for Christmas, and she's fine with every aspect of this except it being in Cardiff. The Doctor at one point is also depressed when in like massive peril with Rose, that he might die in Cardiff. Then he might regenerate in Cardiff, and then he's kind of born there as well, so it's a double whammy for him. Relatedly, I love the interaction between Sneed and the Doctor, where Sneed asks like what these kind of blue entities are, and the Doctor says they're aliens, and then Sneed says, like foreigners? And the Doctor goes, well, pretty foreign, yeah, from up there. And then he points up, and then Sneed goes, Brecon? Which is just like very basic joke. It's funny. It's a funny joke.
Well, isn't that funny? Because I was liking the Welshness of it because of its hiring of local talent. And I'm not Welsh, and I have no vested interest in people from Cardiff being cast in things. But I do believe that, as I say, if it's made in Cardiff, you should be using Cardiff actors. If something's made in Manchester, you should be using Manchester actors. And that does happen, actually, quite a lot. So I'm fortunate there. But Jack, who is Welsh, liked the fact that it took the piss out of Wales. And there's something worth noting as well, that the person who could have taken offence at all of those jokes took them in the spirit with which they were intended, their jokes, and rather enjoyed them. I'm not sure in the modern environment, whereas that you might be on slightly dodgier ground, because there's, as I say, there's and don't let me turn into that 50-year-old man of going, it was better in the olden days. But I'm just trying to add a little bit of sprinkle a bit of glitter onto the po-facedness that occasionally greets conversations about Doctor Who these days. It's supposed to be fun, and obviously Russell T Davies doesn't really hate Cardiff, but it's fun. It's just funny. It's fine, and it's not really meant either. And I'm glad that Jack enjoyed that. But that's interesting that the Welsh guy, what he likes about the Welshness of it is very different to what I liked about the Welshness of it. I liked the authenticity, and he liked the fact that it took the piss. Haha. Oh, see how easily it goes from being 2-0 up to being 2-2, and now let's have Jack score the winner in extra time, shall we? Because I'm not going to win. I never do.
Fifth thing I loved, kind of related to the last one, is the Doctor's reaction to Sneed, like just throughout the episode. But in particular, there's one scene, this guy's clearly an absolute wrong, right? And Ninth Doctor is just kind of amused by this. There's a scene where Sneed just reveals how much of a horrible little goblin he is. He's kind of either admitting himself or getting accused of all these horrible things. He calls the deceased that he works with stiffs. He knew something was wrong with the building, but because the discount is going to increase his profits, he's fine with that. And also, not only did he drug Rose, which was kind of messed up in itself, but Rose says that he apparently had wandering hands, which is really dark, as a thing that they just kind of brush over. And then Eccleston, while all this stuff is being talked about, when Sneed himself is talking about it, he's just like manically grinning through the whole scene. It's bizarre.
Eccleston manically grinning at Sneed is not one of the things that I picked up that I do, but I hadn't actually picked up this time around the fact that he got the building cheap, which helps to facilitate an important bit of business and conversation. So I didn't. I obviously like the soppy stuff more than Jack, because my favourite thing, he didn't mention at all, my number one favourite thing, but then again, I probably wouldn't have mentioned it were it not for the watch that I've just done this time round. So anyway, there we are. And I have to say, there was part of me that was hoping there wouldn't be another one that we agreed on, because then it meant I might have got a victory helped by Charles Dickens, when we both chose different aspects of Charles Dickens, and Dickens was going to be a fairly obvious choice, so it wouldn't have been a comfortable victory. And I would always rather lose definitively than it be possible that I won for reasons that I'm uncomfortable with, which is why I will never succeed in show business. And on that note, Jack Evans is a great comic, really nice guy. And if you need to know more about him, he's going to tell you some of that stuff right now.
So that's my 5 things I love about the Unquiet Dead. My 6th bonus thing would be the fire special effect in the windows of the building at the end of the episode, where it's clearly footage of, like, very obviously much smaller flames, like almost candle size, or like a little log burner in someone's front room, but they've like kind of dragged them to be huge to fit the windows of this huge Victorian house. So it's got that similar vibe of like Thunderbirds, small models, where sort of fire, you could never get it to look big, but in this sense it wasn't a practical effect. It's like a practical effect that's been put in CG. I love it. It looks bizarre. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying I see that and it brings warmth in my heart. Those flames warm my soul.
Well, those flames warm your soul, but they'll look too big when superimposed over your soul. It's funny. I was going to talk about the flames, but I got distracted being soppy, because yes, they looked slightly dated to my eyes. But yes, were always a problem with early CG, but as you say, a slightly comforting problem, because we have it in Pyramids of Mars and a couple of other things, don't we, where the Jack invokes Thunderbirds there, where fire, close-up fire, was then superimposed on a model which was obviously of a smaller scale, so the fire never quite looked in the right proportion to what was burning. And so it's a very reminiscent of old school. So it's actually comforting looking at that, of going, what was then brave and funky and new and brilliant and amazing Doctor Who was still beset by some of the problems that had beset the people that had made the original series, which was at the time getting slightly sort of patronized, because look, television can do things better now. I'm not saying that the makers of New Doctor Who did that, but the tenor of the conversation was sometimes and gone are the old days of special effects like that. Well, no, special effects are evolving and they have continual problems to be overcome, and sometimes the problems that overcome the special effects people of today are the ones that were problematic to the people of the special effects people of yesteryear, and the special effects people of yesteryear had even fewer resources and even more time restrictions, etc., etc. So it's a nice comfort for them, and a connection between the great artisans of yore and the pioneering technicians of today. And I love the fact that a bit of time, 20 years almost, between the Unquiet Dead and now, means that has aspects that we look at in the same way that when I was watching Pyramids of Mars in the late 80s and noticing that fire in that and going, I wish they'd been able to do that better. And I'm sure stuff being made today that looks great today to our eyes will look to the eyes of somebody born today watching it in 20 years' time. They will be more attuned to be able to go, they couldn't quite do that then, that we can do better now. And it all makes Doctor Who part of one continuing narrative of striving and not always succeeding, and sometimes succeeding at the time, but in a way that then doesn't last the test of time, because time goes on and perspectives change and techniques change, and we can suddenly see that things aren't perhaps as convincing now as they were then. But I do seem to recall at the time that even at the time, that fire was always something that the brave, fantastic new witchcraft that was CGI didn't actually manage to do as well as some other things. So that was an extra thing from Jack, which I was expecting to be him telling us all about himself. But there's still a few seconds left on his recording, which is presumably him now going to tell you all about himself.
So thank you very much, Toby, for having me, and thank you for listening. If you want to check out my work, I produce The Jane Edwards Show, which is an alternative comedy chat show in Manchester. I also do kind of weird characters in it, one of whom is Welsh nationalist Uncle Daff, who's like kind of a Welsh nationalist that can't speak Welsh and doesn't really know anything about Wales. And we'll be putting episodes online too, as well as doing it live in Manchester. I've also got a podcast myself called Mandatory Redistribution Party. We're currently on hiatus after our 100th episode, but you might actually like our 100th episode. That might be the place to start for you if you're listening to this. It's called Century, and it's a time travel adventure where myself and my co-host accidentally travel 100 years in the future and past, respectively. And it's a bit like a kind of comedy role-playing game with lots of sound effects, and we've scored it and stuff. Check it out if you want to. Mandatory Redistribution Party. And once again, thank you, Toby.
Well, the Mandatory Redistribution Party is still on hiatus, but it is out there because Jack recorded this a while ago. So it was placed on the high shelf, it says on his Patreon page in October 2023. But there are still episodes there to consume, and you can join the Patreon. You can join the Patreon for free. And Jack but he's also all over social media. And Jane Edwards, the comedian that he mentioned there, with whom he works, did Excess Malarkey, my comedy club, very recently. And Jane is an absolute belter, and I think the comedy you get from them is much more interesting and imaginative and slightly of left field than you might see in a Friday night or Saturday night comedy club, and all the better for it. So do check Jack out. I will be linking to his Twitter in the closing credits, but definitely seek him out. I thought that was a really worthwhile contribution, and he is a young person. He's younger than me, so nice to get a contribution from a comedian who is not like me, who is of the old school. Looking back, he was somebody that is of the younger generation, who sort of who was probably the more target audience of Doctor Who when it came back and episodes like this were on. So isn't that marvellous? Thanks to Jack. Do check him out, and do come and see me, do come and listen to me when I do another one of these Happy Times and Places. I won't be gone for long. I won't be slumbering for long, and if I look like I'm slumbering, I will suddenly spring back to life and try to strangle you with a cheerful podcast. Bye. Well, thank you very much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Haydock, and my special guest this time around, Jack Evans, the comedian, Jack Lewis Evans, at Jack Lewis Evans on Twitter. I'm grateful to Jack and to the patrons who make these podcasts possible, and they include Ruben Herfindahl, Peter Burns, James Curray-Smith, Peter Harness, Ronald Hayden, Rob Leonard, Christopher Meredith, Gavin McLean, Stephen Moffat, not that one, Richard Straw, Neil Tate, Nick Tedston, Tim Arding, Nigel Bromley, Paul Cook, Richard Chalk, Peter Chamberlain, Grant Davidson, John Deere, Chris Dunford-Kelk, Paul Dunn, El Pandras, Susie Ferguson, Jason Gorman, Siobhan Galichon, Paul Harris, Chris Hyam, Ian Key, Ashley Knight, Joe Llewellyn, Philip Marsh, Nathan Martin, Roland Moore, Rick Moran, Kevin Murdoch, Graham Knott, Adam Parker, Barry Platt, Risto Mattisorillo and Frank Shales. The music is by Dave Gates and the artwork by Dylan Patterson. If you would like to join that list of patrons, you can do so by going to patreon.com/Toby Haydock, where for as little as £3 a month you get advance releases, bonus materials, exclusive looks behind the scenes at the various DVD extras that I make, and lots of other stuff. You can become a free patron. I'm still trying to work out what to do with that, but if I get enough, I will be putting some stuff on there that is just for those of you who want to follow what goes on Patreon but not access the stuff that the paying patrons get. So I need to just work out a happy medium between those, but I will, because it's a new thing that's been introduced and it seems worth pursuing. That there also will be the opportunity to go to Patreon and buy specific editions of podcasts without signing up to the monthly commitment. And again, that's a thing that they've just introduced. I'm game. I'll probably do it wrongly because I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'll have a bash and I'll do my best, which is all that anyone can hope for and all I ever try to do. You can also donate via Ko-fi, Ko-fi, kofi.com/Toby Haydock if you just want to do a one-off donation, if you've particularly liked a particular edition or you've had a good week or whatever, or I say something that makes you particularly think I sound like I need a pretend coffee being bought for me. But I totally understand that it's not always possible or preferable to do a financial contribution, but what you can do that costs you nothing but a little bit of your time is to go to all the places that you can get these podcasts, either iTunes, Apple, Patreon, Spotify, even on YouTube, where you can get them as videos these days. Subscribe, like, thumbs up, 5 stars where you can give them, and perhaps a few lines of comment just to let people know what they might be in for that they might like, and that really, really helps, and I'm grateful. But I'm mostly just grateful to you being there and for listening. It really does make it all worthwhile. I'm also on all of the social media. I'm on Twitter at Toby Haydock, also at Haydock Podcasts. I'm on Facebook. I have a Facebook page. I'm on Instagram at toby.haydock. And I have a website, www.tobyhaydock.com. My comedy club, Excess Malarkey, is on Twitter at Excess Malarkey. We lost all our followers in some terrible Twitter cull. It wasn't a cull. We entered the birth date of the club. It said enter your birthday, so we put the day that the club was born, but that meant that it was a minor when it joined Twitter, because it's a building, it's a night, it's not a person. So of course comedy club years are different to human years. Twitter didn't acknowledge that and just wiped us off, and we had to reapply and come back. We still got the username Excess Malarkey, but we lost all our followers. So please follow Excess Malarkey, because we look like Johnny and Excess No Mates right now, and that's a comedy club that's every week in Manchester on a Tuesday, and I also do a new material night on the last Sunday of every month. So come and join me for that if you want to discover that there's more to me than Doctor Who. I mean, not much more, and quite often I mention Doctor Who in the comedy stuff that I do, but nonetheless, I sometimes talk about other disappointing aspects of my life. And there we go. Thanks for that. Oh gosh, iPlayer was a real pain in the snuck out to do this, to get this done, take advantage of an empty house, and thought, well, I'll just quickly do an episode I can just fire up on the iPlayer. And it played the sound slowly and went out of sync, and it did that when I was doing the sense rights as well. So it's obviously a thing. It's obviously just a reminder that no matter how good modern technology is, it still does stuff that frustrates you and makes you want to smash things. And I suspect they did that with the lathe, and we'll probably do it with the matter transporter and the sex brain implant. I don't know what that is, but that's something that somebody will invent at one point. I don't know what it will do. Will it make your brain? No. Will it make yours? I don't know what it will do, but good luck inventing it, and I'm sure you'll have lots of fun. But it will nonetheless be glitchy and make your genitals explode just when you don't want it to. What am I talking about? Goodbye.